Recently, I've been rewatching Naruto Shippuden with a friend of mine who hasn't seen most of the series. It's been a wild ride because it's crazy how much you forget about the series. It's truly been an experience rewatching my favorite childhood series, and while going through that experience, I've been thinking about that dream Naruto game we've been talking about for such a long time. That is, of course, Naruto Fighterz. Obviously, if this game does actually happen, it wouldn't be called Naruto Fighterz. It's just easy to say Naruto Fighterz because we all know what we're talking about. We're talking about an Arc System Works Naruto fighting game. I've been talking about that idea quite a lot on my Twitter feed, and I actually had a few people ask me if I would do a wish list and prediction list. But like I said in my recent Marvel vs. DC video, trying to predict the roster for a game that might not even happen. In fact, there is very little evidence to suggest that either Marvel vs. DC or Naruto Fighterz is going to happen, though I do think Naruto Fighterz is pretty likely. Don't get your hopes up just because I say that. For all we know, Arc System Works is planning on a Dragon Ball FighterZ 2 before they would do a Naruto Fighterz. Even though I like Dragon Ball, I think I would speak for a lot of Dragon Ball fans when I say a second Dragon Ball FighterZ probably isn't necessary. But regardless, that's not the point of this video. The point is, it's not the time for a prediction list or a wish list. There's a couple different reasons for that. When I do a wish list, I like to already know what the gameplay is like because it might inform the type of characters that I would want to see in the game. So for example, if the game was a 3v3 game like Fighterz, maybe I don't want too many puppet users because I don't know how that would play out in a 3 versus 3 game. But if it's a 1 versus 1 game, something more footsie oriented, well, maybe I would be more inclined to get a few more puppet users in the game. There's a similar thought process that goes into predictions, but predictions for a traditional fighting game is very difficult because with a regular like arena fighter or something like that, you have a story mode to work around, and then it's pretty easy to go from A to B and figure out which characters are going to be in the game. But as we saw with the Dragon Ball FighterZ story, it's kind of disjointed and disconnected, and characters from different times come here and there. And so instead of doing either of those two things, I'll be taking a slightly different approach. It will be the same approach I took with my Marvel vs. DC video. I'll be conceptualizing what I think the roster might look like if I was in the shoes of the developers. So the goal here is to satisfy as many as people as possible, get in different character archetypes for movesets and things like that. Now, at the time of me recording this, obviously I've already made the list. I'm not going to do it on the fly. And what I can tell you about conceptualizing this type of list is that it's very difficult. There are so many important and iconic Naruto characters, and quite a few of them have different versions of each other that you might want to see in the game. And of course, with a traditional fighting game, there's only so many characters you can actually get in the game due to development limitations, whether it be time restrictions or money, whatever. Dragon Ball FighterZ launched with a total of 21 characters and has since added 16 more. For the base roster in this video, I've gone with 25 characters because I believe it's a realistic expectation from Arc System Works. That is 4 additional characters compared to the Dragon Ball FighterZ roster, but again, I think that's a realistic goal from Arc System Works. So let's start off with our 100% guaranteed would have to be in the game characters. That's of course Naruto, Sasuke, Gaara, Kakashi, Sakura, and Hinata. All of these characters have to be in the game. I would be shocked if they weren't. On top of that, I will add Mitsuki, Sarada, and Boruto. These are the characters that I believe 100% have to be in this potential game, and nobody could take a slot from them. I just listed 11 characters. Now you're counting them right now and you're saying, wait a minute, Bilbsy, that's not 11, that's 9. That's because I'm going to have 2 different versions of Naruto and Sasuke. I believe it is a realistic expectation from Arc System Works and Bandai Namco. Of course, you're going to want to sell multiple versions of these characters. You're going to want multiple versions of them in the game. We've seen them do this with Dragon Ball FighterZ. We've seen Bandai Namco do this with various other games. The main characters are popular and they all have various different movesets throughout different points of the story, so it's important to get different versions of them in the game. For Naruto and Sasuke, I think the obvious way of doing this is you have the Boruto versions of the 2 characters and then the late Shippuden versions of the 2 characters. Don't worry, we've got plenty of more Sasuke and Naruto on the way. Now for the rest of this roster, we're going to be talking about characters that I believe would make the base roster, but other characters could in theory take those spots from them, and then we'll move into DLC, and then of course you could interchange the DLC characters and the rest of the base roster that we're about to talk about because some of the base roster might be DLC. You'll see what we're talking about as we go. First of all, I do believe Kaguya would be in in this game. Regardless of what you think about Kaguya, she's important to the Naruto world at this point, and I would be shocked if she was not in the game. Pain, of course, is a very popular villain. It wouldn't surprise me to see him be DLC, but personally, I think he would be base roster. Might Guy is incredibly popular, and I'm sure Arc System Works would have a field day animating that character. Itachi, of course, you need Itachi. Itachi is really, really cool. You need more Akatsuki, you need more Uchiha. Itachi fits the bill. Speaking of Uchiha, Madara has to be in the game. I thought about doing 2 different versions of Madara, one for DLC, one for base roster, and they might end up going that route, but personally, I would just do one version of Madara. Maybe he could have a thing like Frieza, where he switches to his other transformation, just like how Frieza switches to Golden Frieza, rather than having to make an entirely different moveset for him. Now, I know that doesn't really work because Madara, of course, has various different techniques that he doesn't have available to him in his base form, but that doesn't stop Arc System Works from doing a transformation like that as opposed to making a whole new character slot. One thing you have to notice as we do this video is that we're going to be cutting a lot of corners to make sure that we get a large variety of characters on the roster. It's just something that you have to do, and this is one of those corners that I think Arc System Works would have to cut rather than having 2 different versions of Madara, bundle it all into one. Killer Bee is up next. This is actually a character I think that would sell very well as DLC, so I was a little bit cautious about putting him on the main roster, but just following Arc System Works for a while now, I feel like Killer Bee is the type of character that somebody at Arc System Works would look at and go, I can make a really fun moveset for that character, and they're just going to take it and run with it, and it's going to be fantastic. Orochimaru, of course, got to be in the game. A lot of people love Orochimaru, and of course, he'd have a very unique moveset. This next one is maybe a bit strange. Some Ino Shikacho fans are going to like it, some aren't. I'm going to go with Shikamaru accompanied by the rest of Ino Shikacho. I'm not going to give an individual character for Choji, as awesome as he is. Not going to give an individual character for Ino. I'm going to put them all in Shikamaru's moveset. Kind of like the Ginyu Force, not really like the Ginyu Force. Think of it more like Android 18 in Dragon Ball FighterZ, but instead of just having Android 17, Shikamaru would have Ino and Choji. Heck, you could even do something pretty close to what the Ginyu Force has with Ino's mind transfer jutsu, but I guess that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day. I do think Konohamaru would make it into the game, but not because of Konohamaru, but because of the Boruto side of the roster. Personally, I think if we do this type of game, Boruto has become big enough and important enough for this to be kind of a Boruto game and not really a Naruto game, in the sense that all of these Naruto characters will have their Boruto costumes. At least that's what I would imagine. Of course, they can have alternate costumes to make them look like their Naruto Shippuden versions for people who prefer that. That doesn't seem like a tall order for Arc System Works. I think they're totally capable of pulling that off. Anyway, I brought up that Boruto stuff because I think you would go with the adult version of Konohamaru. It makes sense. He's the leader of Team 7. Team 7 is already in this game, so Konohamaru should be in there as well. You gotta put Obito in the game, popular character, though I could see him selling as DLC. I also think it makes perfect sense to have him on the base roster. This one took me a while to decide on, but I think the anime version of Momoshiki does have to be in this game. Again, going back to that idea of it being more of a Boruto slanted game, of course still having that connection to Shippuden, I think it's important to have like a Boruto villain. Regardless of what you think of Sai, Sai is up next. He's an important member of the roster, brings some potential cool zoning options to the game. Now this next pick is a bit strange. I've put them in the game because I think that this game wouldn't be coming out at least until 2021, and by then, Kawaki is going to be a relevant enough character not only in the manga but also the anime. So I don't think it would be unreasonable to see Kawaki in the game, if not on the base roster, then definitely as DLC. And for my very final base roster character, I've gone with Kankuro. I love Kankuro, I love the puppet users. You gotta have at least one in the game. I think it makes sense to have Kankuro over any of the other puppet users because of course Lady Chiyo doesn't stick around for very long, and of course Kankuro can reference Sasori in his moveset. Okay, moving on to DLC. Of course we have to have Kid Naruto and Kid Sasuke. A lot of people grew up on the original version of Naruto and not Shippuden. People have very fond memories of these versions of the characters, and DLC is where I've decided to throw in a bunch of Akatsuki, so we're gonna have some more Akatsuki in here as well, starting off with Deidara and Kakazu. Deidara is probably my favorite Akatsuki member. I've always thought his design was really cool. I would love to see him in this game. I just don't think he's going to make that base roster. Sage Mode Naruto is up next. Of course, we're going to have multiple Naruto DLC characters. And for my fourth version of Sasuke, I've gone with the very early version of Sasuke, Sasuke from the very beginning of Shippuden. Now, I know a lot of people might want the Taka version of Sasuke or the Akatsuki version of Sasuke, but I think this version of the character is the one to go with because a lot of people remember that iconic design when he was first introduced into Shippuden, but he also knew the Thunderclap technique all the way back then, so that could be his ultimate attack, and that ties in perfectly. Neji is absolutely a perfect candidate for DLC. His ending in Naruto sets up perfectly to be a character that people would want on the base roster, and then sadly it would make sense for him to not be on the base roster, only for them to sell him to you later, and you're going to be really happy when they announce that Neji is DLC. Minato is up next. Of course, similar things can be said about Minato. Visually an outstanding character, and I'm sure his moveset would be sick. Imagine the mix-ups, baby. He's never letting you block. Originally, I had Danzo in this spot, but I'm going to replace it with Rock Lee. I didn't put Rock Lee in the base roster because I feel like a lot of Rock Lee fans would be satisfied with Might Guy, at least enough until we get DLC where they can get Rock Lee. I had a friend take a look at this list. It was actually Avatar Yaya, and he said that you have an extreme lack of Hokages. And I'm like, what are you talking about, baby? We got Naruto and we got Kakashi. We got Hokages right there, but of course he was talking about the original Hokages, so I added Hashirama. I understand there's a lot of huge Hashirama fans out there who would love to see him on the base roster, but I think he just makes way more sense to be a DLC character. Tsunade, who is another Hokage, and I think she pretty easily makes a DLC lineup. Kimimaru is up next. I love Kimimaru. I love his design. His moveset is amazing. His abilities are just visually outstanding. I'd love to see what Arc System Works does with that. Kisame is the last Akatsuki member for this lineup of DLC, and my final DLC character is Jiraiya. That is the exact number of DLC characters that Dragon Ball FighterZ had throughout Season 1 and 2, just based on the success of Dragon Ball FighterZ and the imagined success of Naruto FighterZ. I would assume that Naruto FighterZ would get a Season 3 of DLC, in which case I would go with Zabuza, Haku, Sasori, and Hidan. So, there you go. There is my character lineup. Now, you might be looking at that maybe, and you might be thinking, wow, this is a pretty solid lineup. But if you just look a little bit closer, you might realize how difficult it was to make this roster. Think about the amount of characters that aren't here. The third Hokage is not here, the Raikage is not here, Tamari's not here, Danzo is not here, the Mizukage is not here, the second Hokage is not here, Jugo's not here, Sugetsu's not here, Kiba's not here, Ino's not here, Darui is not here, Asuma is not here, Kabuto is not here, Yamato is not here. As somebody who is a Tenten fan, I have to mention that Tenten is not here, Shino is not here. It is really difficult to put together a list like this without getting somebody upset. So I hope that you were able to make it to the end of this video with your favorite character intact. I think that this would be a pretty fair roster for a Naruto FighterZ. There's a lot of character variety in here. Naruto as a series actually doesn't have a lot of characters that work as grapplers. So honestly, I think Orochimaru would probably end up being a grappler with like some weird snake stuff. Hashirama might be kind of like a grappler. Kakazu's probably a grappler. Maybe the puppet users are also grapplers. I wonder what Arc System Works would do with like giant transformations that we have in Naruto. I doubt they would be used outside of ultimate techniques, but it kind of makes you wonder how they would handle something like Susanoo. I am guessing that it just wouldn't be in the game, or at least not the same way that you would expect. Maybe it's just part of like a level 3 technique or something. I almost cut Jiraiya from the list at some point doing this video just because Master Roshi didn't make it into Dragon Ball FighterZ, but I thought that was bad logic. I feel like Jiraiya has to make it, especially when you have Tsunade and Orochimaru in the lineup. It feels really weird to not also have Jiraiya. But honestly, I think this is a pretty solid lineup. Let me know what you think. If you want to add a character to here, I better see you removing a character from here. I said that in my Marvel vs. DC video. If you want to tell me, hey, Iruka Sensei needs to be in this game, well then you better tell me who you're going to remove from this roster to get Iruka Sensei in there. Because I see a lot of people do that, okay? I see a lot of people be like, oh my god, how could you forget about, I don't know, Jugo? But no one ever says, hey, you should replace, I don't know, Rock Lee with Jugo. Because they're not confident enough, okay? If you want to tell me who should be in here, you gotta tell me who should go. Anyway, my name has been Bilbzy. I want to thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll be sure to catch you in the next one.